The warmongers have their tails up, that much is obvious. A person must wonder what gods it is they worship, gods that demand blood sacrifice on such a scale. Ukraine is not quite sacrificing its children yet, but given the youthful faces of some of those en route to the fighting front, it's a close-run thing. The death toll in Ukraine is already estimated by Western intelligence agencies at 500,000 souls, a scale of loss of human life in conflict not seen in Europe since World War II, and still the warmongers have not yet drunk their fill. In the United States Congress last week, in the House of the American people, on sacred ground, if you will, members were on their feet to celebrate their decision to send another $60-odd billion to that charnel house. 500,000 human beings cold in the clay, $60 billion. We've learned to bandy these numbers around, like we understand them, like we can meaningfully visualise them. It would take a person 6 days of non-stop counting, day and night, to reach 500,000. To count as high as 1 billion would take a person 32 years. In this way, are we losing touch with meaning, including the meaning and, more importantly, the value of every human life? There in Congress, in that place sacred to patriots, elected representatives waved Ukrainian flags, a tide of blue and yellow, to show how pleased they were with their cash cow, a gift that keeps on giving. New Jersey Representative Bill Pascrell Jr. wore a flag as a cape around his shoulders. To describe that flag waving as a breach of protocol in that place is to put it mildly. Viewed from the outside, it looked like mockery of all that's decent. They were so happy, those elected representatives, and for reasons that make sense to warmongers, those reasons being dollars and cents. Just like the hundreds of billions of dollars already laundered through the tortured turf of Ukraine, the bulk of the latest unimaginable sum will end up where it began, in the US. What goes around comes around, all the way back to the bank accounts of the component parts of the intelligence military complex. The same is true of the pounds and euros and the rest of the currencies flowing like water through that benighted place, made to look like it's defending democracy, when in truth it has only ever been about enriching those who peddle and promote war for a living. Those sums leave those countries via the front door and return via the back door. On another note, I'm loath to ponder what they call little man syndrome, but if the little cap fits, I look at the leaders of Europe, Rishi Sunak, Olaf Scholz of Germany, Emmanuel Macron of France, Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine, all of them excited by thoughts of war fought by other men's sons and daughters. And notice they all fit the bill of those exhibiting the Napoleon complex. Prime miniatures and petit présidents, the lot of them. But all of them evidently have something to prove, and you know that for sure because the narrative is shifting under our feet, inexorably pulled by the lure of filthy lucre. Unelected, surely unelectable British Foreign Secretary David Cameron has already described the Russia-Ukraine war as good value for money, not least because it's the blood of other nations that's being spilled. Earlier this month, he stood alongside fellow warmonger Antony Blinken, US Secretary of State, and said, quote, "I argue that it is extremely good value for money for the United States and for others. Half of Russia's pre-war military equipment has been destroyed without the loss of a single American life." Well, that's all right then. Just dead Ukrainians and dead Russians. War is a racket, remember, said that most decorated of US Marines, Maverick Major General Smedley Butler, after 34 years in the belly of the beast. War is a racket, it always has been, he said. It's possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. The long-ago line about defending democracy in Ukraine never held water for anyone with an inch of brain tissue above the shirt collar, but it's all but forgotten even by the career dafties now. Value for money has been the name of the game, moving the other team's pieces on the board, collecting £200, as we say when we play Monopoly, every time they pass go to war, that is. Only it's a great deal more than £200 a time. So many billions made already, but discernible now is the need felt by the warmongers for a bolder, bloodier approach yet. Foreign Affairs, an American magazine about international relations and US foreign policy, published by the Council on Foreign Relations, carried a piece this month headlined, Europe, but not NATO, should send troops to Ukraine. Quote, a taboo has been broken in Europe. Only a few months ago, it would have been inconceivable for European leaders to propose sending European troops to Ukraine. But on February 26th, French President Emmanuel Macron said the deployment of European forces to Ukraine could not be ruled out. Since then, other European officials have joined the chorus. The Finnish Defence Minister and Polish Foreign Minister have both suggested that their country's forces could end up in Ukraine, end quote. Most recently, the excited, priapic talk from those homunculi of war in their platform shoes and tiny, tiny suits has been about a European army to join the fight. Last week in Warsaw, Sunak said he was putting the British defence industry on a war footing. He pledged £10 billion that his wife's family certainly has, but that we, the British taxpaying citizens, do not, for additional spending on munitions for Ukraine. Quote, we will put the UK's own defence industry on a war footing. One of the central lessons of the war in Ukraine is that we need deeper stockpiles of munitions and for industry to be able to replenish them more quickly, end quote. He said that at a press conference alongside NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg. Perhaps it won't be long before American, British, French and German pieces are brought out of the box, ready for being smashed to pieces in that place where it's allegedly generous lines of marching powder for those at the top and murderous battle lines for the rank and file. Are you angry yet? Are your teeth grinding with the knowledge none of us, not here in the UK, not in the US, nor our neighbours in Europe, were asked about any of this? Far less for our blessing for all that has been shipped abroad to the meat grinder. The spilled blood is everywhere, so too the rotting corpses from which it ran. UN Human Rights Chief Volker Turk was quoted last week saying he was horrified by reports of mass graves of hundreds of bodies at two of Gaza's largest hospitals. Israeli troops withdrew from the Nasser hospital complex in Khan Yunis and Palestinian civil defence teams moved in. The report I read said 310 bodies had been exhumed. Quote, we feel the need to raise the alarm because clearly there have been multiple bodies discovered, said Ravina Shamdasani, spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She said the bodies were buried deep, covered over with waste, that among the dead were old people, women, those with wounds, some stripped and with their hands bound behind their backs. Everyone is blaming everyone else for the horror, but the dead are the dead. War's a racket, the oldest, the most profitable and most vicious, and there's no sign of its spread abating. Iran and Israel have been swapping ordnance, each backed by nuclear powers. Are you angry yet? Do you remember asking for any of this? It's no wonder silence is descending all over, questions and dissent throttled by one so-called government after another. In the same week Congress wrote that cheque for $60-odd billion, President Joe Biden signed off on a piece of legislation numbered 702, part of the FISA Act, massively expanding the power of the US states' intelligence agencies to spy on American citizens. Biden also made plain his intention to deny 170 million of his fellow Americans access to TikTok videos, awarding his administration the right to ban the app in the US unless its Chinese owner ByteDance agrees to sell it to a US corporate. Former US presidential hopeful Ron Paul, father of Senator Rand Paul, said in response, when future historians go searching for the final nail in the US coffin, they may well settle on the date April 20th, 2024. On that day, Congress passed legislation to fund 2.5 wars, hand what's left of our privacy over to the CIA, the NSA, and give the US President the power to shut down whatever part of the internet he disagrees with. The US and its allies have already sent over $300 billion to Ukraine, and the country is still losing its war with Russia. Nobody believes another $60 billion will bring victory from the jaws of defeat, but this additional money is meant to keep up appearances until November at the expense of Americans who are forced to pay for it and Ukrainians who are forced to die for it. Are you angry yet? Other money, not only the $60 billion, but more to Israel and even to Taiwan. Did you know we were laying foundations for war with China? Are you angry that British sons and daughters may yet be sent to die in Ukraine, not in defence of democracy or in pursuit of any honourable goal, but to keep the money flowing into the same bank accounts, to keep the sacrificial blood flowing across the altars dedicated to the gods of war? Here's the thing, while the powerful keep us distracted with forever war for no gain except financial gain, they're also busily making plans to utterly transform our ways of life. The World Health Organization last week appeared to water down its own proposed changes to its pandemic treaty, but if experience has taught us anything, it's that it's not what they say that matters, it's what they actually do, what they actually intend. I say let's watch. Whether we have homes to call our own, what we can eat, whether we can travel, and whether we can ever again hold our own money in our own hands and decide how to spend it, how crops are grown, how and if we can heat our houses. The warmongers are making war, make no mistake, and the real enemy they have in their sights is us and our ways of life. They want to reduce carbon. I say that ultimately we are the carbon they want to reduce.